that's the key. It's that patient of knowing where you want to get to, as opposed to trying to, make do with like guys starting out and selling about 8 tops before they've even had 8 matches, that kind of thing. Very, very important. I know, especially from my perspective anyway, I do feel like it's a lost art. And I know a couple of years ago on my podcast, when WWE were really putting the sort of full commitment behind Roman Reigns, it was like ridiculous. We'd have floods of emails, obviously from fans, and everyone would be emailing me, and why don't WWE turn Roman Reigns heel when nobody wants him? He's been very much rejected at the time. And my reply to that was, there's no point, because if they do that, you're all going to suddenly love him, because that's what they want. So I'm like, how he is now, he is a heel. So like, there's no point changing the guy. It would be pointless, because then he'll be considered quote unquote cool. And it kind of defeats the whole object in the first place of where we're at. But it's such a harder thing to sell, I think.
Well, the whole psychology of pro wrestling has undergone a change at the top, where WWE especially, they're especially guilty as well. You're going to be this, and that's what you're going to be, and we don't care if the people like it. We'll shove it down their throats so hard, so long, that they'll learn to like it. Yeah. And when they rebel against it, they kind of don't know what to do. They just, we'll just keep doing it. Eventually, they'll wear down and they'll go along with the program. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have to call an audible. Yeah.
It's a tough thing for me a bit of pill for me to swallow in the sense that I kind of feel like over the years, especially the last decade, that it's almost got, because of WWE is the biggest player in it all, and I feel like they've educated the fans in such a way that as fans, they're always analysing everything now. And
the other thing too is there's no waiting to see what the people are going to buy. They don't sort of put the bait on the hook and say, "All right, what do you think about this?" That's gone. Everything there's a plan to everything from the get-go, and if that plan doesn't work, they don't have anything else, so they just stick with that plan, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I always feel like there's a marketing machine that just. It can go behind anybody in that place sometimes. I've loosely called the WWE era for a while now the sort of era of the mid-carders, because everyone seems to be an ex-champion somewhere. There's so many of them, but how many of them actually stick and stay at the top is a completely other thing. So although we've got loads of ex-champions, and it doesn't quite sit well with the idea of really getting over to that huge extent that guys used to, and girls as well. But I kind of feel like, because it's obvious now, the cat's out of the bag, and the mystique, the magic, if you will, which when I was younger, that's something I loved. Yes, I kind of knew in my mind, okay, wrestling might not be a complete fight that I'm seeing in front of me, because obviously once you're exposed to things like boxing, and then MMA becomes more and more popular, you're thinking, well, how come this guy hasn't got a bruise, or he's not bloodied or whatever? But what I liked about it was the mystique and the mystery, the fact that they didn't tell me it wasn't a real thing, that they kept that internally. Now, of course, we've got the opposite end of it, where you have reality programs like Total Divas, and it's almost educating fans to kind of look at it that Total Divas means more than the product we want you to watch 8-9 hours worth of every week, because essentially those they're just playing those characters and they're talking about it so openly. I'm like, why would anyone want to invest their time in that when they're talking about it in this way? And it really throws me off that internally that company is doing that for their audience. I get that maybe outside media had done that for years, but to actually be kind of just putting it out there, that's a massive shock for me. And I've always been surprised because I just think it hurts them more. But, where do you sit with that? Do you think that's just me just being a little bit moany and maybe I'm just...
No, I think it's a very valid point. The other thing, too, is with WWE especially, there's just so much product out there. Who has the time?
Yeah.
To watch all this stuff. Who has the time to watch Raw, SmackDown, NXT, 205 Live? I mean, my God, you're talking about 8 hours a week.
Yeah.
Of and the superstars or whatever the hell else they have.
Oh, man.
And then you mentioned Total Divas, and they have a whole network worth of programming with documentaries and specials and so forth. Who has the time to watch all of this stuff? Wrestling was better when it was an hour a week.
Yeah. I agree.
It allowed more focus on the individuals you wanted to push, and also it allowed people time to develop. Where they've got so many people now. Yeah, everybody's just kind of a blip on the radar. Nobody, this is why you don't have more Hogans and more Austins and more Rocks, because they've got so many people that they have to devote time to. There just isn't enough time, even with 3 hours of Raw and 2 hours of SmackDown and whatever. They don't have enough time to devote to a fewer number of people to really let them sink in with the audience.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a different thing. I mean, a different beast altogether in that sense. And recently as well, I'd done like a special on where we were talking about the Hogan Ric Flair match that never took place at WrestleMania 8, and one of the things I certainly, through going through research for that, was the fact that, again, I'd almost forgotten that there was a time when pay-per-views and big events were sold purely on the main event, as opposed to just, many fans now, a year in advance, will just book WrestleMania. They don't know who's on it, but you're buying
and they don't care.
The name.
Buying an event.
No, they don't care. They just want that experience and to say they've been, and, that's what it is now. But there was a time, of course, where you sold on, the big match, whatever you could put together and thrive out. Again, do you think that's another lost piece now? We're probably never going to get back to that as well. Is it more about, because I can see AEW going that way as well, if I'm honest. I know that they want to be different, but I can kind of see it going the same route.
The idea of the big match feel of things, the building up to the big match, a lot of that's lost now. It's a convention of television. It's a convention of that marketing mindset that we just talked about.
Sure.
But everybody can't be a superstar on the same level. Some guys are higher up, and some guys are down at the bottom of the Ferris wheel, so to speak. But that's just the natural order of things.
Yeah. And you want to kind of see it as well. You want to see a ladder. You want to see people rising and going down.
Right. Exactly.
Just for a little bit of logic.
The top stars hang around way too long because there's no place for them to go.
Yeah.
If they operated their brands like a territory, like the old territories used to operate, where you had your babyface champion or your heel champion, whichever it was, and once the up and comer had their program with the champion, and either they became the champion or they lost to the champion, they may have a match or two on the way down, and then they disappear. They'd go to another territory where they'd start all over again.
Yeah.
That's lost. Television eats talent. Television is a hungry beast that feeds on talent. And it needs to constantly be fed. And while it's great to have these guys that you focus on and push as the big superstars, the problem is that that's not the natural order of things. People rise up and move down. That's just the natural order of any sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a missing element.
Yeah, no, I get that. Hypothetically, I'm really throwing out a really bizarre question and a thought thing here, but let's say Vince Jr. never came along and kind of made wrestling what it is today in terms of, buying up all the territories around him and using all his talents and that the NWA was still in existence. Do you think there would be a wrestling industry like, not obviously, I don't suspect it would be as cartoony, like as crazy TV towards how it is now, but do you think it would still been thriving and doing well, having all those different territories today, had that never have happened. Like, I know it's a really bizarre thought process, but
no, it's not bizarre at all. I mean, one person decided to change the industry in a profound way, and everyone went along with it. I think if Jim Crockett had stayed with the parts of the country that he was strong in, Crockett might never have gone out of business.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people have speculated that his business was so strong in his stronghold areas that if he didn't try to go national, he would have lasted. The answer to your original question, though, is somebody would have done what Vince did, maybe not in the same way, but media changed so much.
Yeah, like a network or something like that would have come along, I guess.
Right, with the nationalization of television in America, somebody would have done what he did, maybe not quite the same way. Maybe they preserved territories, who knows? But the guys who had the smaller territories, they were basically doomed.
Yeah.
They were doomed because they were operating in a way that wasn't going to last. In America, commercial television operates differently. Individual companies own stations. I mean, most stations today are owned by big companies that own a lot of stations.
Yeah.
But there are still some stations that are independently owned and operated. There aren't many, but there are still some. But back in those days, we had more independently owned and operated stations. And what changed was the advent of something called the infomercial.
Yeah.
Which is, it existed for years. I mean, wrestling was many times, wrestling promoters paid for their time slots in some way, shape, or form. But the infomercial, people paying for time, as opposed to many of the territorial promoters worked on a barter system to get on television in their areas.
Yeah.
By that barter, it means that the wrestling promotion provided the television show, which generally speaking got good ratings, and the areas were served with a live event product and so forth. The promotion would basically provide the show to the television station for free, and they would split the advertising. They might have if there's 12 minutes of commercials in a 1-hour television show. So they'd split it 6 and 6 or 8 and 4 or whatever it was. They would split it. And because the programs were generally highly rated, they didn't have a problem selling advertising.
Yeah.
In some cases, like in Memphis, WMC, the TV station actually paid for the programming. They paid the promotion.
Wow.
So, I mean, there were all kinds of deals like that. And when the way that Vince took over the United States was he went into a lot of these territories, and these stations that were on barter deals that weren't getting a guaranteed amount of money for their show, Vince would just offer to pay them for the time slot. He'd cut them in on the live gate. He says, well, if you put my show on instead, not only will I pay you X number of dollars a week, I'll give you 10% of the live gate whenever I come to town. And slowly but surely, all these not independent promoters, but all these territorial promoters fell by the wayside because they couldn't compete.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, I just can't believe that back then so many promoters. I mean, obviously there were some like Vern Gagne, for instance. He seemed very hell bent on trying to do something of his own, but I think the writing was on the wall a little bit with maybe how they were, especially towards the end. But like it seems fascinating to me just how maybe it was like a fear tactic. Once Vince had done it to a few promotions, everyone was looking over their shoulder, thinking that could be us next. Right. Because obviously if you didn't go with him, what he'd end up doing is just signing the top guys and kind of break you that way, if you will. Right. I'm not super sure he needed every single talent that he ever got out. I'm pretty sure it was calculated in some way, But a lot of the territories, like you mentioned, Vern Gagne, the AWA, Vern Gagne was a big star.
for many years.
Mm-hmm.
By the 80s, Verne Gagne was past his prime.
Yeah.
And his son